Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hi, and welcome to the ISO Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you very much for any reviews that have been left over the last few weeks. We really do appreciate that. Now, today, I'm joined by one of our consultants at Blackmores, Sarah Ball. So, hi, Sarah.
Hi, Mel.
Great, thanks very much for joining me today. Now, I actually brought Sarah in because I received an email from her a couple of weeks ago with a PowerPoint presentation called What's in a Name? And this is something that I'm personally really passionate about, which is about the naming of your management system. And you might think, oh God, well, that's a bit boring, isn't it? But actually, it's really important because some businesses will have a quality manual or a quality management system. But then what tends to happen is that's got a label that is actually divorced from the rest of the business operations. And it's not necessarily seen as an organisation's way of working. And ultimately, when you implement an ISO management system, and it doesn't matter which standard it's against, it could be information security or quality or environmental management, ultimately that's your business's way of working. And more often than not, nowadays, businesses embrace quality, sustainability, risk management, which could include health and safety and information security. And what we do find is that a lot of businesses have still got separate manuals, or they've still got separate management systems labelled as an ISMS, which is Information Security Management System, or a BCMS, which is a business, and it can be just mind-boggling. So if it's mind-boggling for professionals like us, imagine what it's like for employees within a company. And it's like, what the heck is this thing? So when Sarah sent that email over to me, What's in a Name, I thought, yeah, I've definitely got to get her onto the podcast for her to share her thoughts and views on naming that management system. And before we kind of dive into that, for those kind of ISO virgins, a management system is simply your way of working. It's a framework to meet the requirements of a standard, which would include your company policies, procedures, controls, documents, etc., in order to meet the requirements of that standard. So, yeah, without further ado, I'm going to bring Sarah in now. And, so when you look at what's in a name, I mean, why do you think that's important for a business, Sarah?
Well, I think whatever you name anything is really important to how people perceive it. So companies will spend a huge amount of time deciding on the name for individual products or services that they're going to offer to their customers. They'll spend a long time deciding on what their company name should be, because what you name something is people's first impression of what it is and whether or not it's important to them or relevant or of interest even. And I think with a management system, the name management system in itself is just very uninspiring for most people.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people are scratching their head thinking, well, what is a management system?
Exactly. Straight away, they're either thinking, well, this is something that only the management team need to worry about. Or if it's a system, does that mean it's a bit of software? Is it just that SharePoint system or that bit of software that we use to put our policies and procedures? So it's not very inspiring, and it doesn't really connect your employees to their role in the management system and how it actually helps them to do their job day to day, which is what your management system is ultimately there to do, is to determine how you're going to work and support your employees to work in that way, meeting whatever requirements it is that you're trying to meet for that standard. So for me, the name is a really important first impression for your employees and anyone else who's looking at your management system about what you stand for and what you want your management system to be.
I think you're right. I mean, just having that word management in there, that could almost alienate, a lot of other people thinking, well, it's not really relevant for me because it's just for management. And like you say about systems, people use the phrase systems for all sorts of different things, don't they? It could be a sales CRM system, SharePoint, which is another system. So yeah, all businesses have got different types of technology and software systems that it could be confusing. Well, what is this management system?
Yeah, definitely. And I think by calling it management in itself, like you say, absolutely alienates a lot of people because they think it's no longer relevant for them then if they're not in that sort of management structure within that business. But the best way to make your ISO management system work for you is for everyone to play their part and to understand what their part is. So if the name is alienating people from thinking it's relevant straight off the bat, then it's going to make that engagement much more difficult as you implement it within the company and get everyone to understand what their role is.
Yeah, that's right, because you want to encourage everybody to, well, first of all, to look at it, to read anything within it, to adopt it so that that's their way of working, and obviously to comply with it. And that you're absolutely right, that engagement is so key. And actually that just reminds me, we need to bring you in for another podcast on your engagement amplifier that you've created for the ISology Hub, because that's just awesome. And I know that is a pain point for a lot of businesses in, getting employee buy-in with the management system. But again, going back to basics, one of the triggers is that naming convention, isn't it? I mean, I know that when we're doing proposals for clients, we have to give it a name, helping to implement a management system. And I think, when you start a project, Sarah, as a consultant, you have to give it a name, but it doesn't mean to say that that's the right name. So, I mean, what advice and guidance would you give to a business that may be embarking on creating a new management system, or in fact, they might already have a management system labelled as, I don't know, let's say a health and safety management system? What kind of advice would you give them?
So I think, first of all, early on, when you're creating a new management system, you need to decide on that name really early on in the process, because otherwise people will create their own name for it and then it's very difficult to rebrand at a later stage. So kind of have that discussion right at the early doors. And you want to understand what it is you're trying to convey with your management system. How do you want people to connect with it in the organisation? And there can be lots of different types of considerations to take into account for that. So you can go for names that are familiar in your organisation. If you've got brands that you could potentially associate with, then immediately that's going to make it familiar for your employees. And you want it to be something that they can connect to and feel is relevant to your business and unique to your business, I guess. You don't want it to feel like everyone else's management system, because everyone will be bespoke and unique to that organisation that's implemented it. So consider, what is familiar sort of terminology that you would use within your organisation, and try and feed that into the name in some way. It's a good starting point. I think something that you have to have is it's got to be relevant to your business, to your marketplace potentially, relevant to the sort of customers that you have, so that it resonates with your employees and with your customers as well. It's got to be something that you feel an instant connection to. And I think going back to it being familiar, it's one of those strange things that people do, that they name inanimate objects that they spend a lot of time with. Like I name my car, for example, and I know other people name cars and things like that. It's because it's a tool you're using all the time and you spend a lot of time in it, so you give it a name to make it feel more familiar. And the management system is exactly the same. If it's a tool you're going to be using and you want people to feel comfortable with, then give it a name that they're going to feel comfortable with and that reflects who you are as a business.
Yeah, so in terms of the branding of your organisational products, services, you might have a really strong brand as an organisation. So you almost want the management system to be an extension of that. So could you provide some examples then, Sarah, to kind of, put this into context? Like the name of an organisation and the name of, what they've called a management system.
Yeah, so there's lots of different examples out there. I think some of the ones that I like the most relate to how a management system fits within an organisation, so the sort of key role that it plays. And those would be things like calling it a hub. So I've had quite a few clients that have done a hub or an ISO hub, something like that, and just showing how it's at the core and the centre of what they do as a business, and that it's a central repository and reference point for their employees. Other good examples, got things like the core Or the engine room is a good one as well. So again, this is about putting it at the very heart of your business and how you function, and essentially what drives the business is the engine room. So I quite like that one as a way of showing that driving force behind improvement and development. Quite a common one you'll see is the something way. So ours would be the Blackmores way. So just showing how that is the way that you work, as you referenced earlier, and it's your direction as a business. So that's quite a common one that you have as well. You can also get some quite interesting acronyms that people come up with. So H2O is one of my favourites, which obviously is water, but also is how to operate. So that has a two-pronged approach. So H2O is essential to life, and the H2O is essential to their business.
Oh, I like that one, Sarah.
Yeah.
We could be nicking that one for our management system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea of it being essential to the organisation, but it also stands for how to operate, which I think is a great example. I can't take credit for that.
You shouldn't mention that on the podcast, because I want that one for hours. But talking about acronyms, we have got some acronyms within our management system, haven't we? Like our WOWs,
Yes.
which is our way of working. So we've got procedures, which tend to be flowcharts, but then we've got more detailed ways of working, and that's like defining best practice. So one of the first things that we do in a project is carry out a gap analysis. Now, we could potentially recruit anybody into the business to then complete a gap analysis, but they're not going to do it the Blackmores way, and our way is a very special way, and that's why we want to define that in our way of working. So you could actually have acronyms within your management system, but providing it's really clear what they actually are, I think that's key, because otherwise you're going to just cause even more confusion, aren't you?
Absolutely. And it's important, I think, that you consider the industry that you're in when you're choosing acronyms, because if those letters could mean something else within your industry, that's going to definitely lead to potential confusion. So that's something to consider as well, is that people will tend to shorten names. So if you give your management system quite a long name, without you necessarily choosing it, people will find a shortened version of it. So always think about how that would possibly change the perception or the meaning of that name as well. But you do get all your classic kind of names, like a quality management system, a business management system if you're covering multiple standards, or an integrated management system are quite common ones. But for me, they don't really grab you as an employee. There's nothing that's really engaging about those sort of names. So they have their place, and obviously if a company wants to use it, then that's fine. But I think there's a lot more scope to how you name your management system, and there's a lot more creativity that can be employed in that decision. And if you've got an internal communications or internal marketing team, use that kind of resources that we'd use to create a brand name for naming your management system as well. It's just as important.
Yeah, for sure. I think, don't think that you need to do this on your own. I think is a key message there, isn't it? And I know about a week or so ago, you sent out a survey to all employees to get ideas and suggestions for the renaming of our management system. So I think the more people you can get involved and engaged. And again, it's about encouraging ownership, isn't it? That it is their management system. They have a choice, and sometimes, by coming together to make decisions, it can be a lot more empowering as well, that everybody's played their part. So, and increase ownership of that when it's finally arrived. And you mentioned about communications and marketing. So, for those organisations that have got a comms team or a comms manager or marketing function, or even, you might outsource your marketing, again, it is about the branding and setting out the right kind of message, isn't it? When you're setting out your stall and the way that you're operating as a business, the look and feel of that is really important, because, again, if it's just like a Word document scribbled away on a server somewhere, not really going to cause much excitement or enthusiasm for implementation or compliance, is it? People aren't really going to give it a second glance. So, if you have got a Wizzy intranet or SharePoint site, then the branding could be really a key enhancement for encouraging people to use the newly labelled management system.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the format that you use for your management system is another really key decision that you need to make early on. Where is it going to live and how are people going to access it? Because you want it to be readily accessible. You want it to be at point of use, basically, so that people don't have to spend a long time finding the information they need. But if the name and the branding is appealing, people are much more likely to just engage with it anyway, even if they don't necessarily need something in there. If you're presenting it in the way that you would present content to a customer to get them to engage, then it's only going to have that same positive impact for your employees as well. So almost the amount of effort that you put into making your brand appealing to your customers should be the same amount of effort to make your management system appealing and relevant to your employees. Because when a management system is implemented well and effectively, it's going to deliver huge benefits for the business, and it's worth that time and effort to get the branding right, to get the name right, and for people to feel like it is their management system and something that they really can contribute to and make a success of.
And do you think, taking the time and effort to get that right can help with sharing the vision, values, key principles, the culture of the organisation? Do you think it's helpful in that respect?
Definitely. I mean, the first part of most ISO management systems, the first part of the standard is about explaining who you are as a business, what you're trying to achieve, where you're trying to get to. And that should be a message that's clearly understood internally as well as externally. And you can use your management system to deliver that message. It doesn't just have to come from, an annual general meeting or something like that. It can be a message that's reinforced regularly throughout the year through updates to your management system, or just by communicating out changes that are being made potentially as well. So I think your management system is a really key tool in getting everyone in the business engaged with pushing things forward and driving improvements and making them feel part of that journey. And again, by having a name that's kind of inclusive of everyone rather than suggesting a management level or suggesting just a particular team, because that's what tends to happen if you call it health and safety or quality or something like that. People associate it with that team in the business. So having an inclusive name that resonates with everyone will help everyone to feel part of that journey to improve and push the business forward. So for me, I think that's a really key reason why taking the time and effort to come up with the right name is really important. And if you think you've currently not got a name that is inspiring and engaging, then go through that process and rebrand and relaunch your management system with a new name that will encourage that engagement from people.
Yeah, I think it doesn't restrict you either, does it? If you're doing something that is totally inclusive. So I think that's one of the challenges. If an organisation has a quality manual, quality management system, when they add on other standards, they feel like, well, what's the name of our quality management system going to be then? So it could be an IMS, an integrated management system, or a BMS. But I think more often than not now, businesses are bringing in different things to enhance their way of working. And they could include new ISO standards. They could include guidance documents that are actually ISO standards. So sustainable procurement, ISO 2400. So it's not a certifiable standard, but it's something that could add tremendous value to an organisation where, one of their biggest overhead costs is purchasing of goods and services. And they might be really passionate about, getting down their emissions in Scope 3. So on previous podcasts that we've done, we've been talking about Scope 1 and 2 emissions, but Scope 3 is obviously your interested parties and supply chain. So it means that your management system is limitless. There are no restrictions on what you bring into it to enhance it. Yeah, so, I've been really inspired myself by our conversation today, Sarah, and I'm so glad that you raised this subject. I think it's something that a lot of our ISO show listeners would have enjoyed listening to, and hopefully you've inspired them as well by listening to this today. So if our ISO show listeners would like to leave any comments, a review, or if you've had a bit of an aha moment from listening to what Sarah's had to say today, we'd love to hear about it. And also, if you don't want to miss a future episode, then don't forget to subscribe either. Thanks very much for joining us today, Sarah. I've really enjoyed it. And I look forward to getting you back onto the podcast to talk about your engagement amplifier.
Thanks very much, Mel.
Thanks. I look forward to catching up with you on our next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.